Hello everyone, welcome back to the Splatoon 2 Octo expansion playthrough. Oh, I just realized that the little thingy that the Octoling uses to go through the menus is supposed to be a Joy-Con.
You just got that?
I've never really looked at it before.
I didn't notice it either, but then I never use my Switch with the Joy-Cons in the first place, so it's kind of something that doesn't really register in my brain. I'm gonna confess at this point, I'm actually like really interested in playing Octo expansion. Literally just Octo expansion.
It's very good.
I couldn't give a shit about the rest of Splatoon 2, but this is hitting the right notes for me. And I'm surprised to say that because I have tried to get into Splatoon before, but this just feels right.
Did you play the single player for the other Splatoons?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. It is a little bit basic. Like, I mean, if you are having trouble with it, I would recommend just going to that just so that you can like get a better ease into the difficulty, because I would say that Octo expansion basically just picks up where Splatoon 2 campaign normal leaves off.
It's a bit of a hard mode, yeah.
That's fine. I don't mind a challenging game. The thing is, like, the single player for Splatoon, when I played it, felt like a glorified tutorial.
It is.
That's kind of what
tutorial.
it is.
Yeah, I mean, that's all well and good, but it also felt like one, which is a problem for me. It didn't feel like a single player experience. It felt like an accompaniment to a mostly multiplayer game, and well, that's more or less what it was, really.
So I think that Octo expansion does a lot to improve the Splatoon 2 single player in a number of ways. The first is the levels are in general much shorter. The levels in Splatoon 2 single player felt like they dragged on a little bit too long. That's not to say that every level is quick fire. Some of the levels in Octo expansion are really short, like can be done in less than 30 seconds. But a lot of them are longer. Like this one was about 2 minutes or so. I'd say that's roughly average. Some of them go on for 5 or more minutes. Some of them, again, can be less than 1. Obviously, when you're dying a bunch, then they take longer than that. But the pacing is much faster, is the thing. You're not spending a lot of time in the level just kind of faffing about.
I also kind of feel like the overall experience has a more cohesive style, not just in gameplay and aesthetic. Like, it feels like the pieces here fit together better. Like,
that is also very true in that I think that Splatoon 1 does a better job of this than Splatoon 2's base campaign. Because Splatoon 1, you were only ever using one weapon, so they were able to expand on everything a little bit more, get into a little bit more depth, use the gimmicks a little bit more, just have a kind of a more fleshed out game overall. But in Splatoon 2, they introduced every major weapon type that was available at that point. So you had to have not only, a couple of levels being the tutorial for the normal gun, you had to have the roller level that is mostly just a tutorial for the roller, and the Brella level, and the sniper level, and so on and so on and so on. So the game never really gets to any of the deeper, more interesting parts, because it's spending so much time introducing every single weapon.
For some reason, I'm just thinking of Grand Theft Auto 4.
Why 4 in particular? I've never played
because 4 is particularly tutorial heavy at the start.
Yeah, it spends a lot of time on that. But like, I don't know. That's just what popped into my head just now.
I'm curious as to what they're going to do with 3, considering 2 is already on the system, and I feel like at this point, if you're interested in Splatoon, you kind of have a basic idea of how it works. You don't strictly need to make it a massive tutorial heavy thing.
So they kind of implied in this very brief trailer we got back in was it February or so? Earlier this year.
Yeah.
They kind of implied that it was going to be more open.
I hope so, because it's one of those, I don't want it to just be Splatoon, 2+1.
Yeah.
Where it's still a good game, but it's like, oh, we had all these ideas for new maps and modes and weapons, and rather than just make it a DLC, we'll just make a new game.
Well, you know, like, okay, Splatoon's really fun as a multiplayer game for the people who care about that sort of thing. But, like, looking at this right now, there's a lot of potential in these mechanics for a very, very in-depth and fulfilling single-player game. And this is showcasing a lot of that, but it's also an expansion. How long does it go?
So the Octo expansion is significantly longer than any one playthrough of Splatoon 2 base campaign. I guess you could argue that Splatoon 2 base campaign is technically longer if you were 100%ing it, because you can beat every level with every weapon, and each weapon is... There's like 8 or 9 different weapons available in the single player, but that's just kind of like saying, oh, Zelda 1 is longer than Ocarina of Time if you play Zelda 1 9 times in a row. Like, you know, playing the game with the sniper versus the splatling doesn't change that much of the experience. Like, some of the levels change significantly, like when you're playing the roller level with the charger, or if you're playing, you know, the brush level with the normal gun. But there's only so many times you can see the same levels over and over. If we're just talking about playing the game as is, this is much longer, I would say. And you can just kind of tell by the part count. I believe Splatoon 2's playthrough took us like somewhere around 15 parts, and this is in the mid-20s. So
I mean,
it's a longer game for sure.
I'm seeing a lot of fun and variety here.
Yeah, you change weapons all the time. Like, you can generally pick whatever weapon is your favorite for most of the levels. Like, we've got some levels here, like, you have to use the inkjet here, but most levels give you a variety of weapons to choose. So there's usually one that you will have fun using. Like, I'm not a big fan of the blaster, as an example. I don't really like to use it all that much. But, so, there's variety, but I also don't ever need to use the blaster most of the time if I don't want to. Because there's almost always an alternate option.
I guess what I'm saying is, like, up until this point, it feels like they were underutilizing their own IP.
I mean, I feel like that makes sense. In the first game, it's because it was brand new, and they were kind of testing the waters. For the Splatoon 2 single player, I definitely agree. I hate to just speculate. I think it's because the base campaign of Splatoon 2 was rushed. If I had to guess.
I imagine the game was very much pushed to be a 2017 game.
Yeah.
Because they wanted Splatoon out for launch year for Switch.
Year.
And, you know, at that point, they were very, very likely prioritizing that multiplayer because, you know, that's the crowd that really got involved with Splatoon 1. That's the crowd that the genre really appeals to in the modern day. That chip on my shoulder that I mentioned not so long ago in this very commentary was the way that the shooter genre just sort of died as a single player experience for like 20 goddamn years.
It's ironic too, because it died shortly after it got huge, but part of why, because I think the Call of Duty Modern Warfare, which came out like 2007 or 8, was a huge turning point for first-person shooters, because that game, I think, is kind of the moment where first-person shooter kind of became the most popular genre in gaming for a long time. But Call of Duty Modern Warfare didn't just get praise for its multiplayer. It got praise for its single player just as much.
I'm going to say right now, I don't really understand why. I tried playing Modern Warfare when I got, I think it was on PlayStation Plus a couple years back. And it just, it felt like running around watching other people play a single player campaign. I don't really understand what the appeal was. Maybe I didn't play far enough into it. Maybe it gets better 40 hours in. Who knows? But, like, that's what it felt like. It felt like running around after other soldiers who were killing everything for me.
Did you get to the point with the nuke? Because That's
No.
the point that I remember hearing people talk about, where there's a scene where a nuke drops and you're a soldier in the area as the nuke is dropping, and that supposedly is a very powerful story moment.
It's a very hard hitting
It's
event,
all
yeah.
well and good if it's got powerful.
Which is why they
story
tried to
elements,
badly
but-
replicate it with a no Russian mission and
Oh
Modern
yeah,
Warfare
that
2.
was that. What was that like? Modern Warfare 2 came out like what 2009, and
Like a year or two
yeah,
later,
that did not go over as well.
Well, you know,
in that,
it's all
political
well and
climate.
good if it's a powerful story moment, but I kind of want powerful gameplay to go with it, and
Yeah,
just
I
wasn't
mean,
getting that.
whether or not it's held up is a different argument. I've personally never played it, but it's just at the time people did think that Call of Duty Modern Warfare was a strong like single player campaign. It's just at that time Call of Duty started to get more popular than Halo, because Halo 3 also came out around that time. And that really did mark the shift in games focused on first-person shooters with a strong single-player focus and first-person shooters without.
That's like, I really don't understand why that was the point where that shift happened, because honestly, I would prefer Halo 3 quite a bit.
I mean, Halo 3 did get a lot of it. This wasn't something that happened overnight. I think the only overnight aspect of it was just first-person shooters easily becoming the most popular genre. Like before
Yeah,
that, it was certainly one of them, but there were other things that competed for that top slot, and it was around 2007, 2008, where first-person shooters became the thing to beat. Everything had to be a first-person shooter. Every first-person shooter you were making had to have a multiplayer mode, even if it wasn't built for one. See BioShock, The Darkness, a lot of other games in that
Well,
genre like shouldn't have had multiplayer at all,
It
but
isn't
they
even just
needed
the-
to because you needed to beat Call of Duty.
It isn't even
know?
just the focus on multiplayer, although that was a major contributing factor. The way single player in first person shooters changed, the way single player was handled changed too. And you can see the trend chasing in that respect in some games that.
it was also a matter of XBLA and PlayStation having consistent, basically at the time free or relatively cheap online
Yeah.
that everyone wanted to play rather than the old system previously. So now it was much more unified and everyone could just play
Yeah,
their own
but even
shooters.
when you were playing the games in single player, there were trend chasing in that arena too. You guys remember BioShock Infinite and the way it just dropped weapon selection in exchange for the popular 2-weapon system. And became
Also, we
like,
missed wacky waving inflatable tube arm man.
Wacky waving inflatable arm flailing 2-man. Wacky waving inflatable arm flailing 2-man.
Yeah, so just need to point that out. Honestly, I think that's why Splatoon had such a single player. I don't want to say focus, but they did at least try to flesh out the single player in one. And I think that's part of why
Yeah.
Octo expansion is so fleshed out here too, because Nintendo generally has a much larger single player fan base because Nintendo's online is consistently very, very bad.
Well, the online's consistently bad, and Nintendo hates the very idea of competition, so they kind of don't like to push that, which unfortunately, when you have multiplayer competition, is kind of inevitable.
So I should also stress, just so that I don't get people yelling at me in the comments, Splatoon is probably Nintendo's best online game at the moment in terms of connection, stability, and like features. It's annoying, like, oh, I wanted to play tower control. We can't play tower control. It's Clam Blitz right now. You're playing clams whether you like it or not. Like, that's annoying, but you can always find a match, and the matches load up quickly, and you generally don't have a lot of desync or lag when you're playing Splatoon, which is great. I think that that's awesome. But at the same time, I don't think anybody can say that the Nintendo Online is a quality experience for the most part.
No, I don't think we can. Yeah. I mean, in considering the way all of that stuff goes down, it is important that they get their single player stuff done. So, like, that might be a contributing factor to why Splatoon, I would say, has a stronger single player showing than a lot of shooters that were coming out at around the same time. Because like I might be misremembering my timelines here, but Splatoon does predate like the big single player shooter revival that Doom 2016 heralded.
Yeah,
So
well, Splatoon 1 came out 2014 or 2015, one of those. And Octo expansion was 2018. So like it certainly was, around that same time.
yeah, so like
Doom
they
2016 obviously being 2016.
so for like once for goddamn once there is like somewhat the opposite of trend chasing in the genre, which I'm certainly giving them credit for.
That's just kind of one of those instances where Nintendo sort of got lucky in that Nintendo doesn't ever really chase trends too much. They just kind of do whatever they want. And sometimes that works out and sometimes that doesn't.
The Nintendo "we need to be unique all the time" thing hurts them as much as it helps them, and I think people need to recognize that more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's certainly like Splatoon definitely is an instance of them trying something new and it worked out really, really well. But then, you do also
Then
get...
you have the Wii U, which was the same thing and failed miserably.
Splatoon it's really sad in that Splatoon is one of the only things from the Wii U that I think Nintendo wants to acknowledge like as a success, really.
Yeah, and then they tried to do the same thing with ARMS for fighting games, and it didn't really work.
Yeah. It's unfortunately. I never played ARMS. I feel like ARMS...
I had some time with ARMS. It was free on Nintendo Switch Online for a weekend, and I got some good hours in. And my impression of it is that it hits a weird middle ground between the casual Naruto DBZ arena fighter and a legitimate fighting game and a Smash Brothers kind of game.
Yeah, it can't figure out what it wants to be, and therefore it kind of pleases no one.
I mean, that's one way to look at it. I felt like
Well, it's too casual to be a legit, Street Fighter, Tekken, King of Fighters kind of game. But it's not quite chaos enough to be your Power Stone.
That wasn't really the impression that I got. The impression that I got is that it was coming so close to getting all those disparate elements to sort of fit together into a cohesive shape. And like maybe if they gave it another shot and refined it a little bit more, it would hit that sweet spot. It's not quite there, but it's almost there.
I mean, I think Nintendo has some faith in the IP, considering that they put Min Min in Smash like 3 years after the game launched. So there's certainly something there. My general mindset was it has the same kind of audience that the people who play only Turf War in Splatoon does. In that, it's just a fun little game that I play every now
I
and
feel
then.
like they could refine that and make it just as big as Splatoon if they tried. I think it also has like an excellent sense of humor. And I really like that. So, yeah. I hope they go further with it, but we'll see.